For the most part, this file is identical to the last step that we took before we started working on our CMS. So if you go back to your resource pack directory, in the fourth folder here called MySQL Databases and PHP the 10th step here is nearly identical to what we're looking at. So if you feel pretty confident about what was going on there, feel free to skip this next video, but I want to walk through the details of this script and identify the points that are a little bit different than the other script, and explore what's going on here in the context of a CMS rather than previously just a way to work with a single piece of content. So I'm going to go back to the editor here and scroll up to the top. Now the first time this page loads, what we're going to see is a list of the users. So we're skipping all of the functions. So if we scroll down past all of the function declarations to where the script begins, we see here we're beginning the content with an empty string, and then we're doing a switch statement on the action request variable, which could be a get or a post variable. The first time this page loads, this will be empty. So we're going to go down here and the content is going to be empty. And so we're going to build the content by running the admin users list. Now that function is all the way up at the top. So I'm going to scroll back up here, right here. We begin with an empty output string, and then we load all of the users into a result using a MySQL query, and then we loop through each one using the MySQL fetchArray function. As we go through, we build a table that includes the UID, username, a delete link, and an edit link. Now, before we were using the username as a unique identifier. This time we're using the UID. So we're loading that here as part of the parameters that we're passing back to this page, the admin-users.php page, in order to tell it what record we're working with. If the output isn't empty, what we're going to do is wrap a table around the content, along with table headers that list the UID, username, delete, and edit labels, and then we add the output that we built up here. The first time we loaded this list, there was one record that we had inserted into the database directly through PHP and so we're going to go ahead and return that, along with a link to add a user. Notice that the action here is add form. So let's go back down to where we're calling this. So the content here is admin users list. Now remember, we're loading up the content into the content variable, which we're then using in our page template file to print out in line with the HTML that our page consists of. Now the second time we loaded this page was when we clicked the edit link next to the user. So let's see what happens when we do that. If we scroll back up to the top, we can see what the action is that's being passed. Now when we have the edit link here, it's going to be the action edit form, and we'll have our UID. So I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom. Now we have a request action, we have a get variable, and the action is edit form. So we're going to switch based on that. We'll skip delete. And now we have edit form and add form, both of which run the same function to build the content, admin users add edit form. Now one other thing that's different about this script versus our original CRUD script is that we're being a little more descriptive in our function calls. So now we say add edit form to make it clear that we're building both forms with the same function. And we're passing it the UID. Now because we're also using this for our add form, and when we call our add form we're not going to have a UID, we're using a ternary operator here to check to see whether a UID exists, and if it doesn't, we're passing it an empty string. And this is the way our admin users add edit form knows whether we're building an edit form or an add form. So now let's take a look at this function and see what happens within it. I'm going to scroll up to the top here. And here on line 39 is where our function starts. I'll scroll down so we can fit a little bit more of this script on the screen. Now our function takes one parameter, the UID, and the first thing it does is check to see whether we have a form ID set. Now this happens when we've already submitted the form. In this case, we haven't submitted it, so we're going to skip this, and we'll run this check here to see if the UID doesn't equal empty. It doesn't this time because we have a UID. So what we're going to do is grab the data about the user from the database using MySQL, and we're passing this through the MySQL real escape string, just in case somebody tries to pass something funky through the query string. Finally, we'll grab the values with a MySQL fetch array, which will grab a single row, and this will be how we populate the form. Now real quick, If the form got submitted already and there was a validation error, we're going to get the values from the post variable and use those to pre-populate the form. If neither this line or this line are true, it means that we're generating an add form, and so we're going to pre-populate the values array with empty strings. Next, we're setting up some variables here, many of which will change if the UID exists. So we default to the add form. We say the submit text, which is going to be what our submit button says, is add entry, the action is add user, and the title, which is the title of the page, is add user. Now, if the UID exists, we know that we're in an edit form instead, so we're changing the title to edit user, and we're passing it the username to make it clear what user we're modifying. The submit text now says save changes, and the action is going to be edit user. Finally, we build the form here, and we only have to do this once because we've isolated everything that's going to be different about our add and edit forms up here. Our form is pretty simple, and it looks just a little bit different than our previous CRUD script example. Instead of running ternary operators inline here when we set the values of these inputs, like the username and password input, we're instead using the values because if these values are empty, we've pre-populated them with empty strings here, which makes it easier to read once we get to the form. So we have our username, password, and our submit button. We have our hidden input, which is the form ID. Now remember, we check for that up here, which tells us if we've submitted a form and it didn't pass validation. We have our hidden action input, which will be different for add or edit forms. And then we have a hidden input that's the UID. Now in the case of an add form, this is going to be empty, but it will pass the UID so we know what record to update when we get to that point in the script.